Hey everyone, I never thought I'd find myself posting here, but I really need advice or even just someone to tell me I'm not crazy. My name's Mark, not real name, I'm 34, and I've been married to my wife, Jennifer, 35, for 7 years. We've got a 5-year-old daughter, Emma, who's the absolute light of my life. Our relationship was always what I thought was solid. Sure, we had the usual ups and downs, but nothing that ever made me question her loyalty or love for me. Lately, though, something's been off. Jennifer has always been outgoing and a little fiery, which I've loved about her. But in the past few months, she's been distant, picking fights over nothing, and spending way more time working late or hanging out with her friend Stacy. At first, I thought it was stress. She's in marketing, which can be demanding, and we've both been juggling work and raising Emma. But then I started noticing little things that didn't add up, like how her phone, which used to be left out wherever, is now glued to her hand. Or how she started wearing makeup and perfume to grab coffee with Stacy. I brushed it off for weeks, thinking I was just being paranoid. Now, though, I don't think I can ignore it anymore. It all started to hit me about 2 months ago. Jennifer was always pretty open with her phone, leaving it on the kitchen counter or coffee table. She'd even ask me to check her texts if she was driving. But now? Her phone was practically an extension of her body. She'd take it to the bathroom, to bed, even out to the mailbox. At first, I teased her about it, and she laughed it off, saying, "Work's been crazy, and I don't want to miss anything important." That didn't sit right with me. But I figured, okay, maybe work really is nuts. Except, I'd never seen any signs of that. She wasn't complaining about long emails or back-to-back meetings like she used to. In fact, she seemed happier. Almost too cheerful for someone supposedly stressed out. Then there were the work dinners. Jennifer works for a mid-sized agency, and they've always had the occasional late-night meeting or team outing, so I didn't think much of it at first. But the frequency of these dinners started ramping up, once a month became once a week. And her outfits for these work events got noticeably, let's just say, more polished. She'd come downstairs in a little black dress or heels she hadn't worn since our last anniversary dinner, claiming it was professional attire. Professional for what? A modeling agency? The kicker was when she started name-dropping her coworker Ryan. Ryan said this, or Ryan suggested that. Ryan was hilarious, Ryan was so helpful at work. I didn't think much of it until one night, Emma asked, "Daddy, is Ryan Mommy's boyfriend?" I laughed it off at the time, saying, "No, sweetie, Mommy just works with him." But that question stuck in my head. Out of the mouths of babes, right? That's when I started paying attention, and boy, did I not like what I saw. The turning point came one Saturday night. Jennifer said she was going to Stacy's house for a girls' wine night. I wasn't thrilled about being left alone with Emma again. This was the third girls' night in 2 weeks, but I didn't argue. I kissed her goodbye and watched her leave in a dress that seemed a little too fancy for hanging out on Stacy's couch. Still, I told myself to let it go. About an hour after she left, Emma went to bed, and I settled on the couch with some takeout and a movie. Halfway through, Jennifer's iPad pinged on the coffee table. It was linked to her iPhone, and normally, I wouldn't even glance at it. But this time, something made me look. It was a text from Ryan. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing, winky face." My stomach dropped. My heart started pounding so loudly I could barely think. I opened the thread, and there it was, a whole conversation that left no doubt. He called her babe. She told him she missed him. They talked about how hot last night was and made plans to meet at the same hotel. I was frozen. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I scrolled up, and it got worse. There were photos, nothing too explicit, but enough to make me sick. Her in lingerie I'd never seen before. Him shirtless in what looked like a hotel room. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. My mind was racing. Was this real? How long had this been going on? Why Ryan? Why her? I wanted to throw the iPad across the room, but instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen until the reality of it all hit me like a freight train. She was cheating on me. My wife. The mother of my child. And she wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the messages, my mind going in circles. A part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but she wasn't home, and I didn't want to blow up in front of Emma. So, I took screenshots of everything, texts, photos, and even the hotel address they'd mentioned. I emailed it all to myself, just in case she tried to delete it later. The iPad kept pinging. More texts from Ryan. Let me know when you're close. Room 214. I've got the wine ready, winky face. It was like a dagger twisting in my chest every time I heard that sound. I couldn't take it anymore. I called Stacy, the friend Jennifer was supposedly with. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say, but when she picked up, I went straight to the point. Hey, Stacy. Sorry to bother you, but is Jen with you right now? There was a pause. A long, awkward pause. Then Stacy said, no. I haven't seen Jen in a few weeks. Why? Boom. There it was. All the air left my lungs. I think Stacy could tell something was wrong because she started asking if I was okay, but I just mumbled something about a misunderstanding and hung up. I was shaking. I felt like I didn't even know the woman I married anymore. She wasn't just lying to me, she was roping her friends into it, too. I couldn't believe the audacity. And yet, as angry as I was, I still needed more proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hotel they'd mentioned in the texts. Part of me thought this was insane, like something out of a bad movie. But I had to know for sure. When I got to the hotel, I sat in the parking lot, staring up at the lit windows. Room 214. My hands were sweating, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. After about 10 minutes of debating with myself, I walked in. I asked the front desk if Jennifer had checked in, pretending I was her husband who had lost track of our room number. The clerk confirmed it, Jennifer Anderson was in room 214. My head was spinning. I thanked him, turned around, and left. I didn't go to the room. I didn't knock on the door. I just couldn't. Something about seeing her there, with him, would have destroyed me in a way I wasn't ready for. Instead, I went back to my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. By the time Jennifer got home, it was nearly midnight. I was sitting in the living room, waiting for her, trying to keep myself composed. The second she walked in, I could smell the faint scent of wine and cologne, definitely not Stacy's brand. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Oh, you're still up?" she asked, her voice casual, like she hadn't just spent the evening with another man. She kicked off her heels and tossed her purse onto the couch. "Yeah," I said, my voice cold. "How was Stacy?" Her smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Oh, it was great. Just what I needed. A little wine, some girl talk, you know." "Girl talk," I repeated, staring at her. "At a hotel with Ryan?" Her face went pale. It was like the blood drained out of her in an instant. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice defensive. "What hotel? Who's Ryan?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots. I didn't say anything, just held it up for her to see. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she was silent, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for an explanation. Then she snapped. "Why the hell are you snooping through my stuff?" she shouted, her voice rising. "This is such an invasion of privacy. You're unbelievable, Mark." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you seriously trying to turn this around on me?" I yelled back. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, and betraying my trust. And your first reaction is to call me the bad guy?" "It's not what it looks like," she said, her tone suddenly softening. She sat down on the couch and buried her face in her hands, like she was trying to play the victim. "Ryan is just a friend. We've been working late on a project, and—" "Cut the crap, Jennifer," I interrupted. "I saw the messages. The photos. You were with him tonight. At a hotel. Don't insult me by pretending this is something it's not." She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears. For a split second, I thought maybe, she'd come clean. But instead, she doubled down. "Okay, fine," she snapped. "Yes, we went to a hotel. But it wasn't like that. I just needed someone to talk to. You've been so distant lately, Mark. I feel like I'm all alone in this marriage, and Ryan, he listens to me. He understands me in a way you don't." I stared at her, my heart pounding with anger and disbelief. "So your solution to feeling alone was to spend time with another man in secret? Are you even hearing yourself right now?" She stood up, her face twisted in anger. "You think this is all on me? Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to look somewhere else." That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. All the hurt, the betrayal, it was one thing to deceive me, but to blame me for her choices? That was a line I couldn't forgive. I didn't even bother responding. I just walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, yelling something about how I never appreciated her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word of the argument in my head. Jennifer didn't come to apologize or explain further. She didn't even knock on the door. I think that hurt more than anything, like she didn't care enough to even try. The next morning, things were tense. She acted like nothing had happened, breezing into the kitchen to make coffee while I sat at the table, trying to figure out how to hold it together for Emma. When she walked in, I looked at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, but she just gave me a quick, "Good morning," like we hadn't just detonated our marriage the night before. "Are we really going to pretend nothing happened?" I finally asked. She sighed dramatically, slamming her coffee mug down on the counter. "What do you want me to say, Mark? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. But we can't change what's already happened. Can we just move on?" "Move on?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You betrayed me, Jennifer. You lied to me, and now you want to act like it's no big deal?" She shrugged, as if my pain was some kind of inconvenience to her. "I told you why it happened. You don't listen to me, Mark. You're always so wrapped up in work or Emma that you don't even notice me anymore." Ryan, he noticed. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Don't you dare use our daughter as some kind of excuse for what you did," I snapped. "I've been working hard for our family. Everything I do is for you and Emma. But instead of talking to me, you ran off to someone else." She rolled her eyes and muttered something under her breath that I didn't catch. I stood up, my hands shaking. "This isn't just about you anymore, Jennifer. We have a daughter. Do you even realize what this could do to her?" That seemed to strike a nerve. For a moment, she looked guilty, but it vanished just as quickly as it came. "She doesn't have to know," she said flatly. "We can keep this between us. Like you've kept everything else between us." I fired back. "How am I supposed to trust you after this?" She didn't answer. She just turned around, picked up her coffee, and left the room without another word. It was like she had already decided she was done fighting for us. I sat back down at the table, my head in my hands, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the person I'd built a life with. I felt like I was grieving, but the person I was grieving for was still standing in the same house. I had no idea what to do next. After that morning, the house felt like a war zone. Jennifer and I barely spoke unless it was about Emma, and even then, it was short, cold exchanges. She seemed perfectly content to act like everything was fine, but I wasn't. I couldn't. I spent the next few days gathering my thoughts and trying to figure out my next move. I didn't want to do anything rash, Emma deserved better than that, but every time I looked at Jennifer, I felt the weight of her betrayal all over again. That Friday, I decided I needed space. I told Jennifer I was going to take Emma to my parents' house for the weekend. She didn't argue or even ask to come along. She just nodded, barely looking up from her phone. It stung, but it also made my decision easier. When Emma and I arrived at my parents' house, I told them everything. I hadn't planned to, but the second my mom asked me, "How's Jennifer?" I broke down. All the anger, confusion, and sadness I'd been holding in just came pouring out. My dad sat quietly, nodding as I talked, while my mom cried with me. "You don't have to decide anything right now," my dad finally said. "But you need to think about what kind of life you want, for yourself and for Emma. You can't stay in limbo forever." He was right. I couldn't keep pretending this was just a bad dream I'd wake up from. I needed clarity, and I needed to take control of the situation. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I pulled out my laptop and started researching lawyers. It felt surreal, typing "divorce attorney" near me into the search bar, but I knew I had to be prepared. Even if I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet, I needed to understand my options. The hardest part was imagining what this would do to Emma. She adored her mom, and the thought of splitting her world in two made my chest ache. But I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was constantly second-guessing everything, where trust had been shattered beyond repair. That wasn't the kind of example I wanted to set for my daughter. By the time I closed my laptop, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I had a plan, however tentative, and it felt like a small step toward reclaiming my life. When I got back home Sunday evening, the tension in the house was palpable. Jennifer barely looked at me when I walked in, but she did give Emma a big hug and acted like everything was normal. I let Emma settle in her room before I decided it was time to have another talk, this time with more clarity on where I stood. "Can we talk?" I asked, standing in the doorway of the living room where Jennifer was scrolling through her phone. She sighed and set it down, crossing her arms like I was already wasting her time. "What now, Mark?" she said, her tone laced with irritation. "Are we really going to rehash this again?" "No, Jennifer. We're going to talk about where we go from here," I said firmly, taking a seat across from her. "Because I can't keep living like this. And frankly, neither can you." She raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean? Are you finally admitting you've been part of the problem?" I ignored the jab. "This isn't about pointing fingers anymore. You made your choices, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about mine. I need to know if you even want to try to fix this, or if you've already checked out." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her expression. "Of course I want to fix this," she said quickly, but her tone lacked conviction. "I made a mistake, okay? I've apologized. What more do you want from me?" "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. What you did was a series of decisions, over and over again, to lie, to betray me, and to put another man ahead of your family. Do you even regret it, or are you just upset you got caught?" She stood up, pacing the room now. "Of course I regret it. But you act like this was all black and white. You weren't there, Mark. You don't know what it felt like to be ignored, to feel invisible. That doesn't excuse what you did, I shot back. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt. But instead, you went behind my back. How am I supposed to trust you again after that? She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her arms crossed tightly. I don't know, Mark. Maybe you can't. Maybe we're just too broken to fix. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, neither of us spoke. My chest felt tight, and I could feel my throat closing up. Then maybe we should stop pretending, I said quietly, finally breaking the silence. I saw a lawyer. Her face froze. What? She said, her voice trembling slightly. I haven't filed anything yet, I said. But I needed to know my options. Because if we're not going to fight for this, for each other, then I'm not going to waste any more time living in limbo. Jennifer stared at me, her expression unreadable. For the first time, she seemed genuinely shaken. But instead of responding, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there in silence. It was a small victory, but it didn't feel like one. If anything, it just felt like the beginning of the end. The days following our confrontation were eerily quiet. Jennifer barely spoke to me unless it was about Emma or something mundane, like groceries or bills. It was like we were strangers living under the same roof, just going through the motions. I think we both knew we were circling the drain, but neither of us wanted to make the next move. I focused on Emma as much as I could. Her giggles when we played together were the only thing keeping me sane. But even she seemed to notice something was wrong. One night, as I was tucking her in, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes and asked, "Daddy, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" I froze, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. "No, sweetie," I lied, brushing her hair back. "Mommy and I just have a lot on our minds right now. But we both love you very much. Don't ever forget that." She seemed satisfied with that answer, but I hated myself for not being honest. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her parents' marriage is falling apart? Jennifer, on the other hand, seemed to be completely checked out. She spent most of her time either glued to her phone or holed up in our bedroom. I couldn't tell if she was feeling guilty, angry, or just indifferent. At this point, I didn't care. I was done chasing answers from someone who clearly didn't want to give them. One night, I decided to push the envelope. She was sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while sipping a glass of wine. I walked in and leaned against the counter, trying to gauge her mood. "Have you thought about what I said?" I asked. She looked up at me, her expression blank. "What do you mean?" "About us. About what happens next." She sighed, setting her glass down. "Mark, I don't know what you want me to say. You've already made up your mind, haven't you? You went to a lawyer. You're ready to end this." "I'm ready to end this if you're not willing to fight for it," I said firmly. "But I can't do this alone, Jennifer. I need to know if you're in or out." Her gaze flickered for a moment, but then she shrugged. "I don't know, Mark. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe we're just not good for each other anymore." There it was. The words I'd been dreading but also half expecting. I nodded, my chest tightening. "If that's how you feel, then I'll talk to the lawyer again. We can figure out a way to do this that's best for Emma." She didn't argue, didn't protest. She just picked up her wine glass, stood up, and walked away without another word. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty room. It felt like the end of a chapter, but instead of relief, all I felt was sadness. Sadness for what we'd lost, sadness for Emma, and sadness for the man I used to be, the one who believed in happy endings. After that night, it was clear where things were headed. Jennifer had given up, and honestly, so had I. Any hope I had of repairing our marriage had been crushed by her apathy. It was time to think about the practicalities, something I never thought I'd have to do for my own marriage. I called the lawyer I'd researched earlier, a woman named Diane who came highly recommended. During our initial consultation, she was compassionate but straightforward. She explained the process, the division of assets, custody arrangements, and what I should expect. "Have you and your wife discussed custody yet?" she asked. "Not really," I admitted. "Emma is my top priority. I want what's best for her." "That's a good mindset to have," Diane said. "Courts favor shared custody when both parents are fit, but if there's anything you think might complicate that, you should let me know." I thought about Jennifer's lies, her time spent sneaking around, and how detached she'd become from our family. But I didn't want to drag Emma through a nasty battle. "I'll do what I can to keep it civil," I said. "For Emma's sake." After the meeting, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, anger, relief, and fear. This was real now. I wasn't just imagining a future without Jennifer, I was actively working toward it. I hated that it had come to this, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. Back at home, Jennifer and I continued our silent routine. I didn't tell her about the lawyer right away. I wanted to have everything lined up before I brought it up again. Instead, I started quietly preparing, gathering financial documents, taking note of shared assets, and thinking about how to explain this to Emma when the time came. One evening, while Jennifer was out, I sat down with a notebook and started writing a list of things I wanted to say to her. Not angry accusations or guilt trips, but things I needed to express for my own closure. Writing it down helped me focus, and by the time I finished, I felt a little more in control of the chaos swirling around me. When Jennifer came home that night, she barely acknowledged me before disappearing into the bedroom. I heard the familiar sound of her phone buzzing, followed by muffled laughter. I didn't even bother to feel hurt anymore. I was past that. For the first time in weeks, I went to bed with a sense of clarity. The life I'd known was ending, but maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the worst thing. A week later, everything came to a head. I had just come home from work and was helping Emma with her homework when Jennifer walked in. She looked different. Not guilty or withdrawn like before, but defiant, almost smug. I didn't think much of it at first, but her energy felt off, like she was building up to something. After dinner, she cornered me in the kitchen while Emma was watching TV. "We need to talk," she said, crossing her arms. "Okay," I said cautiously. "What's on your mind?" She leaned against the counter, her expression cold. "I've been thinking a lot about us, and I've decided that if you're going to talk to a lawyer, I might as well do the same." I blinked, caught off guard. "You've already talked to a lawyer?" "Yes," she said, her tone clipped. "I'm not just going to sit around and let you dictate how this goes. If we're doing this, it's going to be on my terms too." Her words hit me like a slap. I'd expected resistance, maybe some anger, but this? This was calculated. It wasn't the Jennifer I knew, or thought I knew. "Jennifer, this isn't about winning or losing. This is about Emma. About making this as easy on her as possible." "Oh, don't you dare act like you're the only one who cares about Emma," she snapped. "You're the one who's been acting like a martyr through all of this, like you've done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "You're the one who cheated, Jennifer. You lied to me, to Emma, to everyone. And now you're trying to spin this like I'm the bad guy." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, Mark. Don't pretend you're some innocent victim." Her words felt like gasoline on a fire. "Checked out?" I shouted. "I've been working my ass off to provide for this family, to give you and Emma everything you need. And you repay me by sneaking around with some guy from work?" Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, I thought she was going to deny it again. But instead, she said something I'll never forget. Maybe if you'd been more of a husband, I wouldn't have needed Ryan. The room went silent. I stared at her, my heart pounding, my hands trembling. That was it. That was the moment the last shred of hope I had for us disappeared. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. If that's how you feel, then we're done. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow and start the process. But let me make one thing clear, you don't get to blame me for your choices. Jennifer opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there. For the first time, I felt like I was taking back control of my life. It hurt, yes, but it also felt like the first step towards something better. The next morning, I called my lawyer and officially started the divorce proceedings. Diane was understanding and efficient, walking me through what to expect and what steps we'd need to take. I told her I wanted joint custody of Emma and that my priority was keeping things as stable as possible for her. Jennifer, true to her word, had already contacted her own lawyer. Things escalated quickly. She contested a few points, like the house and some shared savings, but to my surprise, she didn't put up much of a fight over custody. Maybe even she knew Emma needed both of us, no matter how broken our marriage was. Living under the same roof during the process was unbearable. Jennifer and I avoided each other as much as possible, communicating only through short, clipped conversations or text messages. Emma started asking more questions, sensing that something was wrong, and it broke my heart every time I had to dodge the truth. Finally, I sat down with her one evening and explained in the simplest terms I could. "Mommy and I love you very much," I told her, holding her tiny hand in mine. "But sometimes, grown-ups decide they're better off living apart. That doesn't mean we don't love you or that it's your fault. None of this is your fault." She cried, and so did I. It was the hardest conversation of my life, but I knew it was the first step toward helping her adjust. A few weeks later, I found a small apartment close to Emma's school. It wasn't much, a modest two-bedroom with a tiny balcony, but it felt like a fresh start. Moving day was bittersweet. I packed my things quietly while Jennifer stayed in the bedroom. She didn't say goodbye when I left. Emma took the move surprisingly well. She was excited about decorating her new room and helping me pick out furniture. I made a point to create a space where she felt safe and comfortable, even if it wasn't as big or familiar as the home she'd grown up in. The first night in the apartment, I sat on the couch after Emma had gone to bed, staring at the blank walls. It hit me then, how much my life had changed in just a few months. I felt a mix of sadness, relief, and even a glimmer of hope. I was finally out of the limbo I'd been stuck in for so long. Over the next few months, the divorce was finalized. Jennifer and I had minimal contact outside of co-parenting arrangements. To her credit, she kept things civil when it came to Emma. We worked out a schedule that allowed both of us to spend quality time with her, and for that, I was grateful. As the dust settled, I started to focus on myself for the first time in years. I went to therapy, something I'd always brushed off before, and it helped me process the pain and betrayal. I started reconnecting with friends I'd lost touch with and even picked up old hobbies I'd abandoned during the chaos of our marriage. One day, I ran into Stacy, the friend Jennifer had claimed to be with on those nights she was with Ryan. We got coffee, and she apologized profusely for unknowingly being part of Jennifer's lies. It wasn't her fault, and I told her so. Talking to Stacy was strangely cathartic, like closing the door on a chapter one no longer needed to carry. It's been a year since the divorce was finalized, and life looks a lot different now. Emma has adjusted well, splitting her time between me and Jennifer. She's resilient in a way that amazes me every day, and I do everything I can to make her feel loved and supported. As for Jennifer, I don't harbor the same anger I once did. I've accepted that she made her choices, and while they hurt, they also pushed me toward a life that feels more authentic. She and Ryan didn't last long, something I found out through mutual friends, but honestly, that's no longer my concern. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. It hurts like hell, but it also forces you to grow. I'm a better father, a better friend, and, dare I say it, a happier person than I was a year ago. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, you're stronger than you think. It might not feel like it now, but there's life after.